Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. To join me, go to myworstinvestmentever.com and sign up for my free weekly Become a Better Investor newsletter where I share how to reduce risk, create, grow, and protect your wealth. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz from A Stotz Academy. And I'm here with featured guest, Amy Minkley. Amy, are you ready to join the mission?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
I'm happy to have you. And I want to introduce you to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of FI Freedom Retreats, Amy Minkley's life changed when she discovered the financial independence movement in 2019. After working in Asia for 18 years, she was burned out. In a frantic bid to save her sanity and relationship, a late night online search led her to the FIRE movement. That's FIRE, armed with the knowledge of hundreds of FIRE blogs and podcasts. Amy gained a new sense of hope, overcame a one more year syndrome, and quit her job in Bangkok. In 2021, she moved to Bali to live her dream life and share the message of financial independence and purposeful living. She's now happily engaged to her Australian beloved and organizing transformational FI retreats. Wow, Amy, tell us about the unique value that you are bringing to this wonderful world.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me. The value I bring to the world is giving people an opportunity to step out of a default pattern. And I know this personally because at least I was in a default pattern for many, 2 decades at least, of overworking and being quite unhappy in my life, and offering an opportunity of a different way to live or a different way to see the world. And so, as you mentioned, I'm organizing a retreat, and I am very excited to give people an opportunity to come and experience life in Bali and also see what's possible and whatever their vision is for their own life, to be able to reflect on their life and create that for themselves.
I'm thinking about, like, I like the word rut. Like, I got stuck in a rut when I was riding my bike down the hill, and then I crashed, whatever. But a rut is such a clear thing, and I think that we are all in our own ruts in one way or another. But I was just thinking about, why do we get stuck in these ruts, and fear breaking out? And, maybe we're exposed to some of these things like the FIRE movement as an example, but we don't respond because we're in our rut. Maybe you can help us understand that.
Yeah, I think for me, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I was dominated by some unconscious patterns and fears from childhood, really. My family had money when I was very young, and then my father left the family, and suddenly overnight we didn't have money. And so although I didn't realize it for decades, I was coming from this place and this old belief and old story of money could disappear at any moment. So in order to be safe and secure, I need to save. And in order to make sure I can save, I need to be a hard worker at my job. I need to stay there later. I need to be, working on the weekends. And so that's what I did, all from unconscious patterns. So that was where I got into my rut, is noticing, having these beliefs that dominated my life that I didn't even realize were there, that kept me in that rut.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I tell the story about how when my mom came to live with me, we were talking about, I don't eat shellfish for some reason. I just don't like it, and, whatever. And then my mom and I were talking about, oh, you remember that time when your father and your 2 sisters got, hepatitis C from shellfish when you were 6 or 7, and, and I was like, holy crap, wait a minute. Now I realize why I don't eat shellfish. And it's simply because I had this negative connotation at that very young age. And then it just went into my mind. And the rest of my life, I didn't eat shellfish.
Yes.
And I didn't even know why I didn't eat
Mhm.
shellfish until my mom came and we talked about that. So that's a great thing. And I also have a friend of mine that she had been abandoned by her parents and she knew that this was an issue. So she had awareness of the issue, but dealing with the issue was another story.
Yes.
It's going to be an avalanche of emotion. Whereas the shellfish one, it was completely I didn't have any awareness of it. And it wasn't an emotional avalanche to deal with the issue. I'm curious, like how you think about so once we start to question things, we start to realize, where did I get that story? How do we go down that path of kind of investigating and trying to understand that when we know that it can be brutally painful?
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned, the first thing is to recognize it and to be aware of these beliefs, which I didn't even see, I have to work hard to, to be successful or to be safe. And then I have to save a lot to be safe, and money can disappear any moment. To recognize that belief. But then, as you said, it can be very hard to shift it still. And for me, some things that are quite painful and quite scary in a way is to really face those fears and to really get real about them. What if all of the terrible things that I imagined happened? And what if they all happened at once? What if the stock market crashes and stays low for, longer than usual, 5+ years? What if, something happened with my health and I had to cover that? And to actually, and it's hard to do, but to journal. I've done some journaling about that. What if all these super scary things that I imagined happened and they all happened at the same time, which is, probably unlikely. But what would I be able to do in that case? And I have a lot of options. I have, great connections. I have a lot of expertise in my career. I have quit my job in Bangkok, but I know without a shadow of a doubt, I can always go out and generate more money if I need to.
Yep.
So, for a lot of years, I stayed trapped in a job that wasn't actually that bad, but it wasn't my true calling anymore. And it wasn't my best life anymore. And to step away from that in a job where I was able to save a lot each year, around $90,000 USD a year I was saving. So that kind of kept me trapped, and I'll work one more year, we'll work one more year. But when I sat down and I journaled and I thought, well, what's the worst case that can happen if I take a year or two off, or 3 or 4, and I can always go back and work it. In fact, I found, because I have taken 2 sabbatical years before, and I thought, oh, even taking the sabbatical years, will I still be attractive to employers? And, a lot of times they love that experience, different life experiences. So I think whatever listeners are dealing with, whatever fears or beliefs they may have, journaling and going into that worst case scenario, and also thinking, what if it's better than I imagine? I live so much from fear and what if this and what if that, but what if new opportunities present themselves to me because I have more time and space and energy to recognize them, and I find other ways to make money, and it's so much better than I could even imagine. So I think really allowing, if listeners can allow themselves to wrestle with whatever beliefs they have and whatever fears are around that, and then thinking about, the possibility that it could also open up.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, facing the fear is the way. This, in some ways, you could say there's only one way through it, and that is through it. And I would say that my relationship with money is kind of neutral. We were not deprived when I was young, but we didn't have that much. We saved and all that, but we weren't obsessive about it. And so I never had a big worry about money. I always felt like I could make it and all that. But one of the things that I did 5 or maybe 10 years ago is I really started to work on a mantra. And, maybe for the listeners out there, if you're driving a car or something, don't do this. But if you're relaxing and you're in a chair or you're standing up or you're at the park, what I want to do is let's do the mantra together. What do you think, Amy?
I love it. Yeah,
okay,
let's do it.
My mantra requires a physical movement. We have to put our hands up like this, right? Like we're receiving something from the world. So I'm putting my hands up and I'm receiving, and the mantra is money flows to me. So
Money
let's say it
flows to me.
together.
Yeah, I love it.
Money flows to
Flows
me.
to me.
That's it.
Yeah,
And
money
that's my
flows to me.
mantra.
Mhm.
Money flows to me.
Yes.
And I like that one more than wealth or wanting to get rich or be independent or anything. That money flows to me. I can give it away if I want sometimes. I can spend it on other things. I can save it, but money flows to me. Now, in order for money to flow, I think we've got to bring value to the world too, right?
Yes.
So I'm just curious,
Yes.
like what your thinking is on that side of things. Like you said, I mean, obviously, you can go straight into a job and bring value for a salary, but tell me about the value in, how you've had your kind of, let's say, value journey of the value that you're bringing to this world.
Yes. Great. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, this is a journey for me still. And so I'm still learning how to overcome some of those old wounds and fears and scarcity around money. And learning how to really value my time is something I'm still working on, because as an employer, it's very easy. My salary was set very much based on my, my master's degree or how many years I've experience I worked. I was an international school teacher working in prestigious international schools in Asia. So, that was a very transparent system, unlike a lot of corporate careers where the salary is not negotiated as much. But I am still learning how to really value my time, because I am creating value for people with the retreat. I am making it affordable because I want it to be something that lots of people can come to. And I also recognize that there is sometimes a fear in me, like I don't want to charge too much, and it is a passion project for me as well. So that's an interesting question about creating value, because I feel like I need to do your mantra a little more, because it is, I do have enough of a nest egg, according to FIRE principles, to not have to not worry about it anymore.
Yep.
And I'm also wanting to generate a little bit of income, to cover some expenses, but I can also draw down at this stage if I would like.
One of the things I like about talking to you, the times that we talked earlier, and is that basically you get this feeling of authenticity, like you're going down the path, you're down that path, but you're not saying I'm here at the end, I'm at the mountaintop, I've got I can guide you to where I am, and then let's go further. And I think that there's so much authenticity to that. And I think that's probably why you get, so many people wanting to join, because that's the type of person that I think we all want to work with. I mean, it's great to say, oh yeah, so-and-so's millions and millions and they're at the mountaintop, but that's not relatable to most of us. One of the things that I took a course by Amy Porterfield, and I spent an inordinate amount of money, whatever that word is. And I spent, I think, $1,600 on her digital course academy.
Right.
And it was crazy, particularly when you look at, you can buy a course on Udemy for $10.
Right.
And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I've listened to her podcast long enough. I'm going to do this. So I went into the course, and I had an intern working with me at the time. So he and I kind of went through the course together, and I had him take notes and help me with some things when I didn't have time. And then we just kept going through it. But in the end, what I learned from it is that we've got to deliver some sort of transformation.
Yes.
We've got to really deliver. And therefore, once we can come up with that, then we can charge more. And I think that was my block, is that I felt like, like, I'm just another course out there, on different courses. And so I decided to implement it with my valuation masterclass bootcamp, that we're going to really deliver a transformation.
Right.
And so the first kickoff of the bootcamp, which is next Monday, by the way, I always wear my bootcamp hat.
I love it. I love it.
This is my kick-ass drill sergeant.
It is.
And I always say the same thing. The valuation masterclass is about transformation, not information.
Yes.
And I try to help everybody in the class. I repeat that over and over and over for the 6 weeks. And I try to have them kind of declare their transformation, which is different for everybody. But once you start to create a transformative process, which I think you are, but you got to call it out. You got to really make it clear. You got to help people see that transformation. Once you do that, then the value comes. And then now I can charge what Amy charges because without any fear or worry, because I know I'm delivering a transformation. And you know what the transformation is for a lot of young people? Number one, they've been left behind by adults, giving them bad quality courses online, Zoom, not letting them go to school, you know, whatever nonsense. And also, I would say they're being let down by adults too, because of what's happening with their mobile phones and the attention issue that's going on around the world. And adults haven't helped them at all. They're, you know, 15, 16, 20-year-olds their minds are absolutely distracted and nobody's helping them. So when they come into the boot camp and they get kind of whipped in shape and they're like, it's serious and we got peer support, but you know, this is serious and you got a serious goal to go after. You realize that a huge part of the transformation is just helping people focus on the transformation.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I feel like I know the values there for my retreat. I mean, it's sold out really quick. And the quality of speakers that I'm interviewing now, I've interviewed a lot of 24 speakers already that want to come and speak is phenomenal. And coming to Bali in itself, you know, for me, when I moved here, it just opened my eyes and I thought I had a great life, but opened my eyes to possibilities. So I know the value is there. I think I did underprice it initially because I was, you know, not really sure, but it's my first one. But yeah, I definitely know that, you know, transformation, it's, as you say, Andrew, it's not about information, it's about transformation and giving people access to possibility, options, choice, a new sense of freedom to break out of that rut, you know, that at least I know I was in, and to give them some time and space to reflect on their life is so valuable.
Maybe, can you tell us a little bit about, you know, you and I talked about this episode not being about a specific story, but more kind of your general experience, number one. But also I wanted to understand a little bit more about the event, because that helps us to understand too, the way you think about things and the way you're structuring things. So feel free to take it any way you want, direction you want.
Sure. I mean, I had this idea, you know, when I was working in Bangkok, like you, Andrew, and was unhappy in my job and in an old pattern of overworking, oversaving, saving 90% of my income, investing it all, you know, I have to work one more year, save more kind of mentality, and working myself into the ground and not having balance, which I hadn't had any of the years that I worked. But I had this idea to have a conference in Asia because Asia is my home. I've lived here a long time. I love Bali, and I'd lived my sabbatical life in Bali and really seen what my best life looks like. And I think the power of community is so important. So, I mean, at the event, you know, not only are we going to have adventures together in Bali and connect with the Balinese people and the Balinese culture and go out and do fun things together as a group, really, for me, the value is community. And I've been to 6 fire events in the US. I'm going to 3 more in the next 2 months because I'm headed back to the US for a few months. And, you know, I value these events so much because I feel like I meet very intelligent, skilled, generous people who are so giving of their time and expertise at these events, not only from the speakers, but from the community members. And I can't tell you what an impact that's made on me. You know, to sit down and have someone log into my Vanguard account with me, look at my asset allocations, just giving their time to, you know, talk with me about some of my money worries and concerns and help counsel me through that. To think about some of these worst case scenarios and have the trust to step out on a leap of faith and follow my passion and my intuition. You know, to talk about healthcare and what do you do when you're not employed anymore, all of these things, I feel like there's so much expertise in the audience and in the community, and people are incredibly kind and generous. And so I'm going to bring in great speakers, and I know a lot of the people who are coming and they have a lot of expertise. And so they're very money savvy people already. And so my goal is to bring in speakers that, you know, will offer them information and knowledge, but like you say, transformation is more important. And so it's really also about bringing something new and surprising them with something they haven't thought about already.
You know, the story that in my life is that my mother and father, raised 3 kids, and my father worked full time at DuPont, but it wasn't like he was making a huge amount of money. And my mother was a housewife. And, I would say we never were lacking of things at home of any, amount. We didn't expect a lot, but when my mom came to Thailand after my dad passed away and we sat down and reviewed her portfolio, I just said, you're 78 and you've got enough that you don't need to worry for the rest of your life. You couldn't spend what you've got, in probably 10 years. And I'm here also, so, and that was a remarkable discussion to have. And what % of people are in that position? Very few.
Yeah.
So when we talk about transformation, and I think for the listeners out there, what I want to bring to the listeners is that it's possible, but it's not easy. It takes, you've got to get focused at a young age. You've got to, as I say in the podcast, create, grow, and protect our wealth. You've got to separate creating wealth from growing wealth. And creating wealth may happen through a business. It may happen through a salary, but every month you need that money machine that you're creating the wealth, that you're then carefully growing through the markets, as you've talked about, Vanguard and the like. And then ultimately you have to also protect it, because it doesn't do any good if you've saved up and invested and you're far along and then all of a sudden you make a big mistake, boom, you're set back. So I always try to focus on create, grow, and protect. But maybe you can give some from your own experience of kind of what would be core advice that you would give for the listeners out there who are, I know some of my listeners and my viewers are, they're working hard just like you in their jobs, and they're trying to save. They got family, they got a lot of other things going on, but let's help give them some guidance.
Yeah, I feel like, really getting clear about, for me, what are my values and spending on that, because I've been an obsessive saver in my life. So I needed to think about how can I spend money on things that I value. But I think if listeners can get really clear about what are my values and spending on those things and not what other people value. So, in the US, it's a consumeristic society with a bigger house, bigger car, but really thinking about, is that enough? Is that what I need? What is my enough? And then once you know what your enough is to make you happy, that will allow you to grow the gap between what you're earning and what you're spending, and then invest that gap. And the more that you can grow that gap and invest it, I love low cost index funds, and just set it and forget it, leave it for decades. It will not worry about the ups and downs of the market and watch those and be worried about that. I mean, I feel like, I love what you say about create, grow, and protect your wealth. That's so important. And then I think also, like when, as you said, with the conversation with your mom, also recognizing at some point, like, it is okay to, I know the FIRE movement for so long has been so focused on depriving themselves, and then for this future date, and then they're going to retire early, but they really, don't enjoy the journey. So I think there is some balance there of, ensuring that we create, grow, and protect, and also enjoy the journey and spend on what we value.
I had a time when I got out of high school, my parents said, well, it's time for you to move out. And I didn't have money to go to university or anything. So I lived on nothing. I mean, I worked at a factory making $3.35 an hour, which was minimum wage back then, and barely surviving. But I remember having a lot of fun, and I had just gotten sober. So I was, not drinking or doing any drugs at the time. So I was having great times with my new friends and meeting a lot of people and going to meetings and all of that stuff. And it was fantastic. And it helped me to understand that money is not correlated with happiness. It's kind of uncorrelated. There's no real strong correlation, positive or negative. That's the way I viewed it. And then later, when the 1997 crisis happened, in 1998 was just a disaster for my business, my coffee factory here in Thailand, as well as my job as an investment banker, as an analyst, all fell apart, and I lost that. And the factory was, so close to basically shutting down, and we had to move into the factory and all that. I can survive. And I realized, like, having this neutral frame to money helped me to realize I can go through, anything and the ups and downs of it. So that was, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking. And the second thing I was thinking about is, there was this really popular book many years ago when I was younger, which was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read it and I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty interesting and all that. But now as I look back, I realize it's terrible advice. It's like awful advice.
To get in a lot of debt, really use,
Well, what people don't realize is that the problem is that what was the rich dad? The rich dad was a businessman. He was an entrepreneur. So what percent of the population in this world is an entrepreneur?
Yeah, not many.
0.1, maybe 0.01. Think about big businesses that maybe started by one guy, one man, one woman, and the rest of people are basically working. And I realized that what that book does is it inspires you to be an entrepreneur. But if that goes out to the masses, there's going to be a hell of a lot of disappointment when they realize that they've lost everything and all their time and they're not really an entrepreneur. And that's when I started to think more deeply about the idea of, create, grow, protect. And that's where I realized that, well, for the person who's not an entrepreneur, you've got to create your money machine out of your monthly salary. That's where it comes.
Yes. Yeah, just the boring path. I love J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth, but just really set it up, set it and forget it, and don't have to worry about it. You got it there on your shelf.
Right there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up now. One of the things I want to ask you is that if people like what you're doing and they want to learn more, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, they can go to FiFreedomRetreats.com, and the retreat in September is sold out. However, I'm trying to open up a few more rooms. So if they'd like to add their name to the waiting list, that would be great. I am planning a retreat for May, I think, 2024. So I've had such a great response. I definitely see that there's a need for community because it can get lonely on this journey, saving and, just trying to build for your retirement. Being around like-minded people, who give us ideas, who inspire us to see something new and a new possibility for our lives is incredible. So I think getting together, there's nothing like an in-person community to really bring some enthusiasm to the journey and reinvigorate you on your savings and investing journey. And sometimes learning one piece of information. I mean, I've gone to all of these. I'm going to, 9 after this by May. I've always, they feel like investments to me because I've learned tips or gotten ideas that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So it opens up a lot of possibility. Well,
listeners, Bali's not that far for many of my listeners who are in Asia, but for those that are in America, what a great chance. So what we'll do is I'll have the links in the show notes to that. You say the first one, the most recent one that you're doing is already full, but let's put it in the show notes so people can check it out. And I'm going to check it out also. I don't travel that much anymore. I must admit, I haven't been traveling much. Okay. Now let me ask you, for the person that says, I can't make it, but I like what you're saying and I want to get started. I don't know much about fire movement and I want to get started. What's the best resource that you'd recommend for their starting point?
I would recommend J.L. Collins, A Simple Path to Wealth. I love that book. I feel like it's, and there's so many podcasts and books, and, I listen to the Choose FI podcast, the Afford Anything podcast, Stacking Benjamins, your podcast, they're already listening to this podcast. Those are kind of US specific podcasts, but there's great podcasts in Australia and Europe. Captain Fi, My Millennial Money in Australia. So, there's fire podcasts depending on your investment options, different parts of the world. I think those are great resources. And I do think finding an in-person event near you is great, or a meetup. There is something about meeting people in person and having those conversations that's very important.
How would they find that? Like, I don't know, like Bangkok as an example, or if they're in New York or, LA or something like that, how would they find it?
I mean, there are other events going on in the US, such as campfi.org, which I went to, 6 of those and I love them. And there's meetup groups as well online. So you could search in Australia, there's not as many multi-day events, which there is something special about that.
Yeah.
You know, you can go to a one-day meetup or have beers or find those meetup groups, but building a relationship with people over time and really having some deeper conversations is nice. So that's why I wanted to create something in the Asia Pacific region, because there wasn't any multi-day event over here. And in Europe as well, there's not a multi-day event. But yeah, I think if someone searches online for fire meetups in whatever country they're in, or looks sometimes on a local meetup group with Choosify, they might be able to find a meetup group, or they can send me a message and I can help them as well.
It's interesting, you know, I teach a lot of events, and I just that second morning of the event is like magic. It's like, okay, I'm back and everybody's back and we're committed to this, and it's just something magical about that second day. So I know what you mean. All right, last question. What's your number one goal for the next 12 months?
My number one goal is to create an incredible Fly Freedom event, and to bring amazing speakers in and a great group of people, and really create a time for people to talk and connect, you know, to build those relationships and I know they're going to be lifelong friendships, because that's what I felt when I went to the US. I met lifelong friends that I still stay in touch with.
Fantastic. Well, listeners, there you have it. Another story to keep you winning. Remember, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. If you've not yet joined that mission, just go to myworstinvestmentever.com and join my freakly, see, I am the worst podcast host.
I like it, freakly.
My freakly Become a Better Investor newsletter to reduce risk in your life. As we conclude, Amy, I want to thank you again for joining our mission. And on behalf of Stotz Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
I would say take the plunge in your life. Really reflect on what you want in your life and think about, is my money aligning with that? And then take a plunge with it.
Fantastic. And that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and protect our wealth, fellow risk takers. Let's celebrate that today we added one more person to our mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. This is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz, saying, I'll see you on the upside.